All right, let's do this. Today, we are turning back the clock, way, way back, over 5,000 years to see something incredible, the birth of ancient Egypt. We're going to break down exactly how the very first dynasty built the foundation for a civilization that would last for 3,000 years. Okay, let's get into it.
Now take a look at this. This isn't just some complex chart. You can think of it as the original recipe for building an empire from scratch. It's got all the core components, all the ingredients that let a bunch of scattered villages along the Nile River become this single, unified powerhouse of a state.
So that's the big question, right? How in the world did they pull it off? What was the secret sauce? What were the key ideas and the big innovations that built the foundation of the entire pharaonic state? Well, we're going to walk through it, ingredient by ingredient.
First up, you need a powerful unifying symbol. And for the ancient Egyptians, that symbol was the king. But we're not just talking about a ruler, we're talking about a divine figure, basically a god walking on earth.
It all seems to kick off around 3100 BC with this one king, Narmer. He's the guy who gets the credit for being the great unifier. He's the one who brought the two lands of Upper and Lower Egypt together under one crown, and in doing so, he officially started the first dynasty.
So how do you communicate to everyone that you're the one and only divine king? You need some serious branding, and that's exactly what the Sarak was. It was this early royal crest, kind of like a logo, that had the king's name in it. It was an unmistakable mark of his authority.
And this shows you exactly how it worked. You see the king's name inside that rectangle? That represents the palace. And who's sitting on top? That's the falcon god, Horus. The message was crystal clear. The king is Horus on earth, and his power comes straight from the gods. No questions asked.
Okay, so how did they get this message out there? Well, that brings us to one of the most famous artifacts from this entire period, the Narmer palette. And this isn't just some pretty carved stone. You should think of it as a press release, a piece of political communication carved to last forever.
I mean, this is basically state propaganda that's 5,000 years old. It shows King Narmer, literally larger than life, crushing his enemies and celebrating his big win. By making powerful images like this and the Sarek, the first kings could project their absolute power all across the new kingdom.
Okay, so you've set up a divine king as the ultimate source of power. Awesome, but a symbol can't run a country all by itself. And that brings us to the next big problem. How do you actually build a system to manage this new kingdom?
I mean, think about it. It's a massive logistical headache. How do you collect taxes from people hundreds of miles away? How do you manage food supplies? How do you enforce the rules? You can't just wish it into being. You need infrastructure. You need a government.
Their first move was brilliant. They built a brand new capital city, Memphis, right at the perfect spot where Upper and Lower Egypt meet. This was a total masterstroke. It let them control everything moving up and down the Nile. It became the political and administrative heart of the whole operation. And from Memphis, they started building a real government, a centralized administration. And how do we know this isn't just a guess? Well, we know because of tiny little artifacts, like this ivory label tag you see here. It's a little piece of physical proof, our window into the birth of bureaucracy. And that gets us to the most crucial point. If you want to manage things like grain and taxes, you have to be able to track them. And to do that, you need a revolutionary piece of tech: writing. The invention of these early hieroglyphs was an absolute game changer for controlling the state.
So these little tags they found on jars of oil or wine, they weren't just simple inventory labels. No, this was the very beginning of record keeping, of taxation, of a real bureaucracy that could manage a whole economy. This is where the state's power becomes real and tangible.
And of course, this didn't just happen overnight. If we look at the timeline again, you can see how this builds. After Narmer, you have kings like Aha who kept working on these systems, making them better, and really cementing the state's control over generations.
So we've got a divine king and a working government, but there is one more ingredient, a really powerful one that made this whole thing last. And that was an ideology that connected the king's power not just to this world, but to the next one, to eternity.
Let's start small, with just this one burial pot. The quality of it tells you a whole story. To make something like this, you need skilled craftsmen. You need trade networks that go all the way to the Levant to get wood and to Nubia for things like ivory. The king's burial alone could mobilize the entire economy.
Now, let's zoom out. All those amazing goods went into gigantic tombs at the royal cemetery in a place called Abydos. And these weren't just graves. They were massive construction projects, huge stages designed to show off the king's power and make sure his journey to the afterlife was a success.
And these rituals were just unbelievable. The tombs were packed with treasure. They buried entire boats nearby so the king could sail in the afterlife. And in the very earliest days, they even practiced retainer sacrifice, where servants were killed to go serve the king in eternity. It was the ultimate and maybe the most brutal display of royal power.
And when you look at the full timeline, you can see how it all came together. From that first king, Narmer, through his successors like Jair and Den, these three pillars, the divine king, the state bureaucracy, and the promise of eternity, they worked. They created a stable monarchy that could be passed down from father to son, and that set the stage for the next 3,000 years of Egyptian history.
So let's put all the pieces together. What was the final blueprint, the secret recipe, that the first dynasty came up with?
Here it is. This is the recipe for building a civilization that lasts for millennia. You need a divine king as your unifying symbol. You need a central government to actually run the place. You need the technology of writing to keep control. And you need these huge, monumental rituals that promise forever and lock in the king's divine status.
They created a system so powerful and so stable that it completely shaped the ancient world. And that just leaves us with one final thought. If these were the essential ingredients for building their world, what are the essential ingredients, the symbols, the systems, and the technologies that we're using